to the front, back, sides, and top of uniform, gear, and equipment, and vehicles be visible from all directions. Add more locations in which the ID alone can be made visible. Just the number was too small. Have the consequences of not having the white lettering and numerals on a black background on these different things, meaning that they lose the authority and the actions for that. Anyone who is not properly identified is banned from making arrests or orders or using weapons, is accountable for paying all legal and medical costs and loss of income as a result that officer's actions while unidentified or improperly identified, and non-payment to the officer and employee from public funds or from the officer during the time not properly displaying ID visible from all directions, with the net half pay to the immediate supervisor for that time period the subordinate is not properly displaying. Discipline should be escalated with additional violations, including being fired. And those civilians who are under the control of that person will not be liable for arrest or fines or to obey orders if any officer not properly displaying ID visible in all directions.
Would you please wrap up your testimony?
And any injuries or property damage caused by that officer without ID properly displayed shall be promptly reimbursed, reversed. Person's name will be cleared, and all their costs will be paid by that employer.
Thank you. It is helpful if these, Edith, thank you for your testimony. It's helpful, but not required. If you could submit these in writing, you have a lot of suggestions that we can use in looking at the bill to go further. Are you able to submit these in writing?
Thank you so much for asking. No, the police gave me a traumatic brain injury, so I cannot be looking on the screen to be writing something or to be emailing something. But I can receive phone calls and I can talk.
Okay. I will flag your name, phone number, and email that have been submitted for our records, and have someone reach out to you to make sure that we can capture your thoughts. Okay?
Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Thank you. Jesse, you're next, and then Allison Cole, Jennifer Butler, and Josh Markey.
This is Jessie Gittemeyer. Hi, my name is Jessie. I am a Multnomah County resident. I'm testifying in support of LC 17, 18, 19, and 20. These bills make bare minimum changes, such as displaying the name of officers and placing limits on the use of chemical weapons against citizens. It is upsetting to think that there would be opposition or trouble getting them passed. I urge the legislator to do everything they can to protect the lives and rights of Oregon citizens by scaling back the power of the police force. These are some basic first steps, but the legislator needs to make bigger changes. We must remember why we have police, to protect. When that purpose is no longer served, which we have clearly seen through indiscriminate murder and violence perpetuated against citizens, particularly Black citizens, we must look at the system as a whole and replace failing institutions. I see no reason why these bills would not pass through the legislator, and I urge you all to do everything you can to make sure that they become law. Additionally, I have not had time to review LC 825, but I support the legislator taking any steps necessary to limit or abolish qualified immunity in the state of Oregon. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield the rest of my time back to the chair.
Thank you. Allison Cole, Jennifer Butler.
This is Emery. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Madam Chair. This is Emery. Can you hear me? I was on the line for.
Yes, please proceed.
Okay. Good afternoon, co-chairs Manning and Bynum and committee members and staff. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Emery Mort from North Portland in Oregon. I come to you as someone who organizes with a network that works on police policy and issues locally and statewide. Our network and others work hard to honor your process. We educate and organize people to understand your work and these potential bills before us today. I want to say clearly, and I and many of the networks support passing the bills LC 17, 18, 19, and 20. I support making all strong changes you hear from constituents on those bills. I'm disappointed that we really worked hard to bring a lot of people to raise their voice today, and that they are now maybe not going to be heard. And so I hope we find a way to hear from more voices, because more voices really need to be heard right now from around the state and from people who don't normally get to speak. So I'm actually going to cede the rest of my time in the hope that others who don't get to speak as much to the legislature get to speak today. And I will, you've heard from me before, and I will also submit, I'm actually going to written testimony the rest of my time. And yes, thank you for working so hard, and I hope you pass LC 17 through 20, and then continue to work hard and pass great bills in the future. Thank you. I yield my time.
Thank you. Allison Cole, Jennifer Butler, last call. Star 6 to unmute. Okay. Next, we have Josh Marquis.
Yes.
I feel like there's a former title there, so forgive me. All I have is first and last name. Reverend Lauren Dart.
Sorry.
This is Josh Marquis.
Just a moment. Okay, I have both of you. Let me finish reading the rest of the names so that they can get ready. Josh Marquis, Reverend Lauren Darst, Deborah Kolodny, and Lamara Haynes. So first we'll have Allison, and then we'll have Mr. Marquis.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Allison Cole. I live in Portland, Oregon. I'm a constituent of Representative Kenny Guyer and Senator Dembro. Co-chairs Manning, Bynum, and members of this committee, I'd like to testify about LC 742, which is now LC 17. The revisions of the current draft serve no one. The erasure of the chemical incapacitance ban is really troubling to me, and I also feel that the bill further codifies the use of brutal force against demonstrators in our streets. I understand that these bills have arisen to address the tumult of the current moment, but they definitely will have long-lasting impacts for mass demonstration in our entire state. So for LC 17 as currently written, the bill provides that law enforcement can continue to injure, maim, and poison civilians who come out to express their worldviews. The language stating that the use of chemical weapons and impact musicians may not be allowed except against an individual engaged in conduct, otherwise justifying the use of physical force by a peace officer, really just promotes the status quo. Like, let's be real, the ability of officers to correctly identify an individual in the crowd who is breaking the law, target them exclusively, and injure no one else in the process is deeply flawed. We've seen repeatedly over the last 98 nights of demonstrations that police show no discretion towards members of the crowd. They've beaten people who are following their orders. They've beaten medics, press, people in wheelchairs, grandparents, teens, and houseless individuals. To assume that law enforcement could suddenly practice a strong discretion under the direction of this bill is insane. So I really believe that making changes to the Tort Claims Act and allowing persons to sue law enforcement is not a deterrent. I feel like it's a backhanded apology. It's also classist. A lot of people who live in poverty or houseless or struggle with mental illness are unlikely to have the resources to pursue litigation. Also, I think that it will just kind of trap people in years of litigation and trauma. And we all know that law enforcement will pull out all the stops to attempt to incriminate an individual who sues them. We all know. Thank you very much for your time. I will submit the rest of my comments in written testimony.
Thank you. Josh Marquis.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair, members of the committee. My name is Joshua Marquis. I live in Astoria, Oregon, where I served for 25 years as the district attorney until January 1st of last year. I've been a lawyer in Oregon for about 40 years. I'm here to address LC 825, which, as I assume, although there's not a lot of information about it, is essentially to abolish qualified immunity. Normally, when somebody speaks, they have no special protection or immunity from their comments. If they were to defame or libel someone, they could be sued. And even if it's eventually determined that they did not libel, the cost can be devastating. As legislators, you enjoy total immunity when in session. You cannot be sued for any comment made in a speech or hearing, regardless of its truth, or for that matter, even if you know it's untrue. Some types of speeches are considered so critical that they are protected, even in some cases if they turn out to be untrue. But so long as one, the official believed in good faith that the conduct was lawful, and two, the conduct was objectively reasonable. This is set down in a 1982 U.S. Supreme Court case called Harlow versus Fitzgerald. Importantly, the legislature cannot simply eliminate this like it feels. There needs to be judicial approval. At the moment, the mob is at the door of the police, with everyone from the governor, the state attorney general, the Multnomah County DA, and members of the Portland City Council making it clear that they consider officers targets of opportunity, not defenders of the citizen. This LC has been hastily drafted during a special short session designed to address the very real needs of the COVID pandemic. But if it passes, the results will go on and on. You can expect significant resignations from police work. Depolicing, which has already begun in many places, will get out of hand because there'll be no reason for officers to continue doing their job. There'll be a massive rise in spurious lawsuits. The bottom line would be more crime, less protection, particularly for poor people, people of color, and those who are victimized at much greater rates than people like me. Because of the difficult decision you legislators have to make, you enjoy absolute immunity, far beyond qualified immunity. This LC is targeted at the women and men who protect our community by telling them that any mistake, even when made in good faith, endangers not only them, but community safety, their job, their family, and even their home.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Markey. Next we have Reverend Lauren Darst, Deborah Kolodny, Rabbi Deborah Kolodny.
Yeah, thank you.
And Lamar Haynes. Followed by that panel, we have Shamiko Montgomery, Jason Kafori, and Mitch Hicks. Reverend Darst?
Yes,
Rabbi
yes.
Kolodny?
Co-chairs Bynum, Manning, and members of the Joint Committee on Transparent Policing. First of all, I'm sorry for confusing things earlier on, thinking that you might have been calling for me. As you said, my name is Lauren Darst. I'm a resident of Marion County, and I serve as a pastor at a local Lutheran congregation in Clackamas County. I also serve as the Oregon Synod Council, the governing board that oversees all of the Evangelical Lutheran Church and American churches in the state of Oregon. Thanks for allowing me this time to share. I'm speaking in general support of all of these LCs, but I'm most concerned that 17 and 19 are taken seriously and are adopted. The current climate of unrest and discourse is happening in large part because law enforcement has, for far too long, not been transparent, nor have they been held accountable when use of force has been utilized in lawless and unconstitutional ways. Anyone in any position of authority must have checks and balances, just as we do in my profession and all sorts of others, in order to be able to gain and maintain the trust of the people they serve. This is particularly true for authority figures who have been given tools and the legal ability to use force in order to keep the community safe. Without the ability for the public to know that the individual law enforcement officers are being held accountable in transparent ways, there is no way for citizens to feel confident in knowing that those who are entrusted with such significant powers are being held to the highest of standards. Since life and death are literally in their hands, the standards must be as high as possible. In a similar way, public trust is being eroded by the indiscriminate use of less than lethal, quote unquote, weapons, such as rubber bullets and tear gas, impacting innocent bystanders and even the press. Utilizing such weapons should be a last resort and only when the life or significant bodily harm are in danger. The indiscriminate use of tear gas in particular is also infringing on the rights of many to protest. Knowing that the crowd could be tear gassed at any moment without warning means that those who have asthma, COPD, or other respiratory ailments cannot safely gather to protest. Thank you for your time. I really, truly appreciate it.
Thank you. Next we have Reverend Kolodny. I'm sorry, Rabbi. I'm sorry, Rabbi.
It's okay.
Please
it's okay. It's okay. Co-chairs and members of the committee, my name is Rabbi Deborah Kolodny. I live in Multnomah County, and I'm the executive director of Portland United Against Hate and the rabbi of Portland Sun Shul. Having spoken with over 100 people and read through dozens of firsthand reports on extraordinary police violence against almost peaceful protesters, and having pastored to over a dozen people who have received horrific injuries, I want to thank you for your work on LC 17 through 20. That being said, I believe that there are miles to go before we sleep. I understand that the original draft of LC 17 banned the use of all chemical weapons and limited the use of impact projectiles more than this current version. I understand that the original version also required emergency medical services on the ground and safe space for medics. We believe that all of these should be included, and frankly, I agree with everything that Allison Cole just said in this regard. To be clear, PUA supports only de-escalation for crowd management. In addition, we urge that legislation ending qualified immunity is challenge-proof in the courts, and it's not clear. It's not clear if that's possible in what you're proposing. We further urge legislation that ends police allyship with white nationalist violence. If police continue to ignore their firing of live rounds and pink guns, as well as pipe bombs, not one of us is safe. Not one of us. While this is outside the scope of this legislation, for the record, PUA supports a minimum $50 million reduction in the Portland Police Bureau's budget. For your further deliberations, our written testimony will include a link to the 12 demands and a community-written Stop Cops Riots letter, as well as PUA's August 5th Police Violence is Hate Violence report. So you can see the concerns these LCs do not yet address and the reasons behind those concerns. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Rabbi Kolodny. We appreciate your testimony. Next, we have Lamara Haynes, Shamika Montgomery, and Jason Kafori.
Hello, this is Lamara Haynes. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm speaking as a private citizen who lives in Portland, Oregon. So I'd like to say that I'm in support of these LCs. At the same time, they do not go far enough, and they're long overdue. It is a time to be bold, and the lack of innovation is so concerning to me. Why should law enforcement still be able to use riot control weapons at all? Because of property damage? Why is the sanctity for human life, especially those within the margins, systematically disregard for concessions to police? Don't Shoot Portland released a study detailing the impacts of tear gas on humans and the environment. We're in the midst of a global pandemic, the never-ending pandemic of racism, and a climate catastrophe. We need healthy people and a healthy environment more than ever. We do not need police, especially like the PPB, the Portland Police Bureau, who maim and violate protesters on a nightly basis while allowing a caravan of white supremacists to ride through our town. In what other jobs would someone be able to cause physical harm without being let go, reprimanded, or disciplined in any way? Why are the police and their actions an exception to every common sense rule in the treatment of people and the environments in which they live? Saturday will mark 100 days of protest in Portland. The people have not stopped assembling, and even with heightened state violence and white supremacist violence, they still are assembling and asking for basic humanity. Black lives do matter. Law enforcement's ability to cause harm needs to be curbed, and we need to move back to the language of the first draft of LC 742, now LC 17. People's lives and the safety, as well as that of our environment, depend on it. Thank you. I am complete.
Thank you. It's just about 2 o'clock. I'm going to pause here in the testimony to queue up Representative Sanchez if she's available and on the line. And I also want to take a moment to get clarification from our staff. Mr. Marquis' testimony on LC 825, maybe I thought I missed something, but that is not a posted LC. So I wanted to ask staff about that.
Chair Bynum, this is Anna Newell. No, it has not been posted.
Okay. Jillian, did you have any additional comments on that?
No, Chair. I just wanted to make sure that you got answered. I didn't know if Shanna realized that she was going to get paid for that question. So.
Okay. All right. Did we have any committee members have questions about that? I actually don't remember seeing it, so I was confused about the testimony on it. We put that on the agenda to make the public aware that that was in our, that that was going to be forthcoming as a part of our conversations. But I did not post it as something that was ready for viewing.
Madam Co-Chair, if I may jump in there, as it says there, it's being queued up for further conversation in the 2021 legislative session. Whatever it looks like, we did talk a little bit about it, I believe. But I also wanted to kind of clarify a comment that was made by one of the presenters in relation to HB 4301. My closing statements on the Senate floor with that bill. I did mention a group of law enforcement that had input and had supported the bill, but my colleague and Senate Judiciary Chair, Senator Brzezowski, made further comments where he actually read the names of those agencies that supported the work of HB 43. So it did not include a broad brush that said every law enforcement agency supported that bill. So I think that's very important that since it was brought up, that I put this out here on the record. Thank you.
Senator Brzezowski, did you have a comment?
Yes, thank you, Madam Co-Chair. And this is more for Josh Markey because he has given his testimony, and it seems at this point we're not really looking at that issue today. I hope that if he's still on the line, and if not, staff should reach out to him and make sure that he monitors and he can resubmit his testimony if and when a bill concept that covers what he testified, he could then put it on the record then. Because what I'm understanding at this point, yes, we received it, but it's not really applicable to the matters that we have before us today.
Correct. Any more? I only see one hand raised. I'm looking in the chat box here. Okay, it looks like the queue is clear. Representative Sanchez, you'll go next if you're on the line, then Shamiko Montgomery and Jason Kafoury. *6 to unmute yourself. Okay, the next group after those three would be Mitch Hicks, Scott Rudolph, and Tyler Coleman. So Representative Sanchez, Shamiko Montgomery, and Jason Kafoury. Okay. If any of those six people are on, you can feel free to chime in. *6 to unmute.
This is Shamiko.
Thank you, Shamiko. Please proceed.
Dear Co-Chair Bynum and Manning and members of the Joint Committee, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to testify on this important piece of legislation. I'm the Reverend Shamiko Montgomery, and I'm a clergy of the Presbyterian Church USA in Bend, Oregon, an elected school board member in the Bend Lapine School District, and I am part of the BIPOC Faith Leaders Council for Black Lives, a community of faith leaders in the Pacific Northwest committed to justice and liberation. I testify today with sincere hope that this committee makes a stronger effort to work with public defenders, families whose loved ones have been killed by police, BIPOC communities disproportionately affected by the policing system, and other organizations that can help ensure each policing bill has strong accountability mechanisms. I am testifying today in favor of LC 19, which directs the Department of Public Safety Standards and Training to establish a publicly available database of certain information about misconduct and discipline of public safety employees. While I'll focus on this proposed legislation, I want to affirm that LC 17, 18, and 20 are steps in the right direction, but leave too much room for law enforcement misinterpretation. Currently, individual officers with a pattern of misconduct are able to move from jurisdiction to jurisdiction across Oregon, with no mechanism to allow those communities to learn about an incoming police officer's history of harmful action. In Bend, we just received a new chief of police. I'm disappointed by the lack of transparency and availability of information about him in his previous role with the Portland Police. This is the person that will oversee not just our entire community, but also our school resource officers in our public schools. If our public schools and teachers are to be held to a high standard of transparency around conduct and discipline, I expect no less from our police. For public entities to work well together in partnership, we need and demand transparency.
access to records is essential for good decision-making and community trust. As a faith leader, but also as someone publicly sworn to serve my community, I support LC 19. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Sanchez, are you on the line? Okay. So she's trying to get on now. Okay. Jason Kafoury?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can. Please proceed.
Excellent. I'll be quick. We only have 2 minutes. I agree with Alyssa Kenney-Geyer. Let's try to do something in another short session, if at all possible, because we have great momentum. We've accomplished some good things with this committee, but there's a lot more that we need to get done, and the next session is a long ways away. So on the chemical number 17, I still don't think we need to be having chemicals shot at people and projectiles shot at people. You have an exception which says against an individual engaged in conduct otherwise justifying the use of physical force by a peace officer. I think that's a little vague and a little open-ended. Obviously, what happens every night in Portland is they declare a riot because you guys passed the thing that says they need to declare a riot, and every night they use tear gas and projectiles. So what the current system is not working, and I think we need to strengthen that piece of it. On the uniforms, you said 25 feet visible from the back of the uniforms, but there was nothing about that I could see on the front of the uniforms as to how far visible or how those have to be demarcated. It almost made it sound like it was going to be like a basketball player on the back, but the truth is most cop force is front force to the person, and then in these big protests, you'll move away and you don't get to see them anymore. So I think that needs to be clarified, but it's a good bill. The database has a lot of really good pieces to it. I think it's coming together really well. I appreciate putting in the Citizens Review Board. I think that is another piece of data that would be helpful, especially with the City of Portland voting on the Citizens Review Board here in November. One thing I did want to flag, it says that if there's an arbitration proceeding, that the data is not released unless it's, quote, in the public interest to release the data. I can tell you now, as one of the members said earlier, it's expensive arbitration, but it also can last 2, 3, 4 years before the arbitration results come out. So I think you want to look at that and figure out what to do and how to specify what is the public interest of when that data needs to be released. And on number 20, I'm still a little confused as to why only a random number of the officer is what is searchable for the public. I don't see how that provides any insight as to bad officers in that database if all you have is a random number, unless it's just straight, gathering data. So I think that needs to be fixed. And that's all we have in 2 minutes.
I appreciate your testimony. Thank you. I am going to switch over, and staff, just let me know. I think I'm supposed to I can open another informational hearing in the middle of another informational hearing, right?
Yes, you're okay to just open up in addition to those that are open.
All right, thank you. I am going to open the informational hearing on LC 882 related to mental health and policing. This LC is not posted. It is not drafted. We had a discussion in the last informational hearing about Cahoots. We've been talking, we heard from the Pendleton Police Department and that officer's request to have support for police to go out into the community to address mental health issues. So that is the purpose of Representative Sanchez bringing this to the forefront. And again, the purpose of this hearing today is to let the public know what we are working on, what we are considering, what we think is rising to the top of the community's agenda. So I'll open the hearing on LC 882.
And Chair, I apologize for interrupting. Just to correct you, the draft is posted. We received it this morning, and so it was just posted this morning. I apologize for the confusion.
Thank you. My apologies. All right. Representative Sanchez.
Thank you, Chair Bynum, members of the committee. For the record, Tana Sanchez, State Representative, House District 43, North and Northeast Portland. I think what I really want people to know today about just all of the things that we're thinking about is that in general, overall, we're all in a little bit of crisis right now, right? We're all in a little bit of mental health, even though we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to own it. We don't want to say anything about it. We don't want to admit that maybe we're having a struggle right now. But I think as an entire state and nation, we're struggling with our mental health. And what happens in a time when you're struggling so much and you don't have anybody to talk to or deal with, help you deal with this situation? I think we've been in a mental health crisis for quite some time, but it's getting worse for people. And I just want to say that straight up and out loud so that people can think about it a little bit. In that being said, though, in order for us to deal with these things a little bit better, we have to analyze for ourselves whose responsibility this is and how do we handle it in such a way that it makes much more sense. It has never been my expectation that the police handle a mental health crisis. It's just never been my expectation. It's unfortunate that we don't have a good system in place to deal with that. So therefore, that's the only response that we've had. We don't have systems in place to deal with addictions. Well, I mean, we do, but not as well and to the capacity that we need, in particular here in the state of Oregon. And then when you combine those two, you're often dealing with people having a really, really difficult time managing both of them, and then we end up with the police involved in some way, shape, or form anyway. And I suppose I just want to say what we're proposing here is an option, another option, and another way of looking at this whole issue and saying, let's figure out how we support people to deal with their mental health issues or deal with situations in a different way rather than responding with a criminal justice perspective. Because just because you're having a hard time and you're struggling with something doesn't mean you should go to jail. Or in the cases that unfortunately has happened in the past where people get hurt over it. And so, the opportunity to create something more system-wide like the CAHOOTS model that you mentioned earlier that we've already talked about is just an amazing thing. And I think something that we have to really think about investing in. And I've been having a lot of conversations with folks, in particular social workers, around the mental health issues that we are dealing with as a state and a country now, and what we will be dealing with going forward. And I want you to maybe take some time to think about what did the mental health status look like for people in 1918, 1919, 1920, and then as it rolled into the 1930s with a depression, with a financial destitution that happened to an entire country. I want us to think about how traumatic and hard that is over that span of 15, 20 years, and thinking about what that will look like for us now as we hit this in literally 6 months. We are all struggling, and we will be struggling for some time now. And if we don't put something into place to help people manage this and not go to jail for it, for your anger and your frustration and your hurt and pain over losing everything that you worked so hard for, we're going to be having a hard time. And I just think it's so very, very important that we take the time and put in the effort to make something happen so that we can save lives here in the state of Oregon. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are any questions for Representative Sanchez, we haven't been doing questions, and I want to make sure that we preserve as much time for the public testimony as possible, but I'm willing to entertain questions if necessary. Okay.
Chair, real quick, no question or anything, but I do appreciate Representative Sanchez bringing this issue forward. As I understand, Senator Wyden and Congressman DeFazio has introduced these bills at the federal level, the CAHOOTS model. So this is a unique and special deal. I'm really excited that we have the CAHOOTS in my district, in particular where I live in Eugene, and it does serve as a model, but the whole thing is going to come back down to how are we willing to finance this and stop dehumanizing mental health. We've, since the advent of getting tough on crime and all of these 3 strikes you're out, that is a tendency to load jails up, especially for the benefits of private jails. My research, my assessment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Sanchez, for your testimony today. Okay, so next up, we're going to have Mitch Hicks, Scott Rudolph, Tyler Coleman, and then Mary Ruth Petzing, Rob Bovett, and Marie.
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chair. This is Mitch Hicks.
Okay, just hold up one hot second. I'm going to pause for a question from Senator Thatcher, and you'll be the first on deck when we finish answering her question, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Thatcher.
Oh, hey. Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just, it was something that was brought up a little earlier when you had taken a break and asked, I think you were asking staff about testimony from former District Attorney Josh Markey about LC 825. And I see it on the agenda, and I wondered why, and I heard other people also speak to qualified immunity. So I was wondering what the question was about the appropriateness of his testimony, or maybe I misinterpreted what you meant, Madam Chair.
Yes, thank you. So what I thought I was hearing was him refer to specific parts of a bill, not necessarily a line number, but certain proposals. And I haven't made any proposals, or there's not a proposal on the table except the notification of intent, further intent to discuss this as a long-term proposal. Does that make sense?
Okay. That clarifies it for me. Thank you. I was just a little confused. I appreciate the clarification.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to move to the next 6 people to testify. And if there are people who have testified, are pros at this, feel that they have access to the legislature in other ways, if they would make space for people for whom this is their first time, that would be wonderful. I want to make sure that the people who've taken time out of their day to try and testify, that we get that opportunity for them. I don't want people to be frustrated. So Mitch Hicks, Scott Rudolph, Tyler Coleman, Mary Ruth Petzing, Rob Bovett, Maria Cahill. Mitch, I think you were first.
Good afternoon, co-chairs and members of the committee. My name is Mitch Hicks. I am the Chief of Police for the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission. I speak today as a 27-year law enforcement professional and a citizen of the Shoshone-Bannock Nation of Idaho. You may recall that a few years ago, tribal police in the state of Oregon obtained statutory peace officer status through Senate Bill 412. And I'm speaking today just to encourage the committee to either request the Legislative Commission on Indian Affairs and committee members themselves to conduct formal consultations with tribal governments and tribal police leaders in Oregon on these matters. You may know that tribal police programs are under the oversight of several federal entities, Bureau of Indian Affairs, Office of Justice Services, FBI, other federal law enforcement entities, as well as the United States Attorney's Office. Our organization itself provides law enforcement services in Oregon, Washington State, and the state of Idaho. So we want to avoid any unintended conflicts with Senate Bill 412, as well as any unintended conflicts with matters of tribal sovereignty and confusion and complexities within Indian country law enforcement jurisdictional matrix itself. So those are my comments, and thank you for the opportunity to address the committee today.
Thank you for your testimony. Scott Rudolph, Tyler Coleman, Mary Ruth Petzing. Okay. Rob Bovet. Mari Ruth, please proceed.
Thank you. Co-chairs and members of the committee, my name is Mari Ruth Petzing. I live in Hood River County, and I'm testifying today in support of LC 19/762. I'm an attorney. I work with many clients facing collateral consequences of citations, arrests, and convictions. I want to talk about two things today: the chilling effect of secrecy on reporting misconduct and the unfair disadvantage in what information is public. When clients tell me about an incident of police misconduct, they are frequently afraid to make a formal complaint. Especially in small communities like mine, they know that they will run into the officer or officers involved in the future, and they have real fears around retaliation. So making a complaint is often an act of bravery. Yet some clients would be willing to take that risk if they knew that they could make a difference in their community. When I tell clients that they will likely never know the outcome of a complaint and no one else in the community will be able to be warned about a potentially abusive officer, they choose not to file. Without community confidence in a transparent complaint process, acts of misconduct will continue to go unreported. Additionally, allegations made against my clients are public record. The citations and police reports are used against my clients on a daily basis. But when facing collateral consequences in immigration, housing, volunteering, school, employment, just daily life, my clients have no access to the disciplinary history of the law enforcement officers upon whose word my clients are being judged. If my client is being denied a green card by an immigration officer based on a police report, and the officer who wrote that report has been found by a prosecutor to be unable to testify in court due to a history of dishonesty, my client should have the right to know that. If my client is being denied a chance to be a volunteer driver with their church's meal delivery program because of a traffic citation, and the officer who issued that citation has 10 complaints for issuing bogus citations to racial minorities, my client should have and be able to share that information. For these and many other reasons, transparency in law enforcement discipline is essential and just. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Rob Bovet, Maria Cahill, followed by Jack Smith and Jennifer Cho Kane.
Co-chairs Bynum and Manning, this is Rob Bovet. I'll go next if you can hear me.
Please.
I am a regular, so I will make it very fast, 30 seconds or less. My name is Rob Bovet, legal counsel and legislative director for the Association of Oregon Counties. So I'll just speak to one bill very briefly, LC 746. That's your arbitration bill. Two quick points. First, the arbitration selection provision. You've heard concerns from others, or cops and Representative Doherty. I'm not going to address those specific concerns, but my overall concern is I actually don't think this accomplishes what you're trying to get at. I think it actually won't change it. In terms of the statewide disciplinary standards, you've heard concerns about that as well. Overall, I think this bill poses some challenges. I think it also presents some opportunities, and I would very much like to participate in any work group or discussions you have moving forward on this particular bill, and quite frankly, any of the bills moving forward. So after disposal, thank you very much for the opportunity, and I'll stop talking right now.
Thank you. We appreciate your input. Maria Cahill, Jack Smith, Jennifer Cho Kane, and then followed by Ernestine Flemister.
Maria Cahill here.
Please. Thank you, Maria.
Hello. My name is Maria Cahill. Today I testify on behalf of Pacific Northwest Family Circle, a group of families whose loved ones were killed by police. They work together to educate the public and change laws and policies. They are a politically diverse, multiracial group of families that struggle for justice together by consensus. Three things that families agree should be priorities for the Oregon legislature. 1, discipline police for misconduct. 2, extend the statute of limitations for bringing lawsuits against police to at least 30 years. 3, change internal police procedures to recognize the failure of the government to protect families and loved ones. The legislative concepts that have gone through committee are largely downstream bills that support people after being subjected to police violence. Sadly, these LCs will not reduce the likelihood or frequency of police killing loved ones. Family members feel that the proposed LCs should not be the first priority of the legislature. Instead, finding a way to discipline police officers without being found unconstitutional because of federal laws on qualified immunity should be the very first priority of the Oregon legislature. Without this, loved ones will continue to be killed by police simply because police have the discretion to do so. When police kill a loved one, the government has failed that loved one and that family and the community. There are governments that go months, sometimes years, without killing a single one of the residents in their country. Our country's government cannot go a day without killing someone. No one can convince us that loved ones need to be killed on a daily basis. Over 380 people have been killed by police in Oregon in the last 28 years. This is a rate of about 13 people per year. Few officers have been disciplined. Those that have all had their discipline overturned and their privileges restored, resulting in no officers actually being disciplined. I ask you today, are you prepared to fail another family member? Are you prepared to take responsibility for the deaths of 26 to 78 more loved ones while you serve your terms working on less pressing legislation? This testimony is offered in loving memory of 19-year-old Christopher Kalanji, killed by Clackamas County sheriffs during a mental health crisis, and all Pacific Northwest Family Circle loved ones and all lives stolen by police. Thank you for this time.
Thank you, Maria. We honor the loss of your loved ones. Okay, Jack Smith, Jennifer Cho Kane, and I wanted to acknowledge that Scott Winkles has graciously removed his name from the list of people offering testimony to make space for the public. So I'm going to try and get through all of our lists. I've asked for permission to go over. I need technical permission first, and then I need permission from members of the committee. So that is the process I'm working through, just to be transparent. Jack Smith or Jennifer Cho Kane? Star 6 to unmute, followed by Ernestine Flemister, Jur Swigert.
Okay. Yes, hello. This is Jennifer Cho Kane. Dear Honorable Co-Chairs, Representative Bynum and Senator Manning and the committee members, thank you for the opportunity to give testimony today. We have been catapulted out of the collective complacency and denial which have allowed racism to thrive among our institutions unabated since the founding of our country in 1776 and the state in 1857. It was only in 2001 that the state of Oregon removed the provision established in the Oregon Constitution in 1857 that banned Black people from coming to the state, residing in the state, or holding property in the state. The state also had the highest per capita Ku Klux Klan membership in the country, which still has residual effects with far-right groups such as Patriot Prayer, known for its white supremacist ideology, responsible for the recent shootings of protesters against racial injustice. As a concerned citizen in Portland, the events of the past 4 months have highlighted for me the need for laws to protect peaceful protesters, LC-17, from excessive force, including the use of plastic and rubber bullets that have caused permanent injuries and disabilities to survivors. Non-lethal weapons are a multi-billion-dollar-a-year business and growing. The industry could be worth more than $9 billion by 2022. Does Oregon want to continue to support such companies while undermining the right for citizens to protest, which is a right of the governed? I strongly recommend that LC-17 names tear gas as a prohibited method of protest control used by state, city, and county officials. The history of racial exclusion and bigotry fueled by self-interest will require strong anti-racist policies to ameliorate and correct the effects of the racist past. We can begin with basic provisions as outlined by the proposed legislation to protect civilians, outlaw excessive force, and require public reporting of misconduct. Complaints filed and allegations of excessive force limit immunity and arbitration that impede the ability to effectively hold officers accountable. I ask that the legislative body that you commit to enacting anti-racist policies to correct the long history of injustice and exclusion in Oregon's shadowy past. Thank you so much.
Co-Chair, you're on mute.
Sorry, forgive me. Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Cho Kane. Next, we have Ernestine Flemister.
This
This is Jack Smith, and for some reason I wasn't being able to unmute earlier.
Please proceed, Jack.
Thank you. So my name is co-chairs Bynum and Manning. My name is Jack Smith. I'm a resident of Multnomah County, but I'm actually reading for Sister Claire Joseph Meyer, who is unable to appear today, and she has asked me to read her statement. So thank you for allowing me the opportunity to testify on this very important piece of legislation. My name is Sister Claire Joseph Meyer. I'm from Eugene, Oregon. I serve as a campus minister on behalf of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. I'm speaking in support of LC 17, particularly regarding use of crowd control weapons for mass dispersals. These are incredibly difficult days with no easy answers for the questions that weigh in our hearts. I'm aware of recent statements from police agencies in Oregon expressing grief and anger about the lack of public support. I have every reason to believe their grief and anger is sincerely felt. It is really, really hard. But I also hear the voices of those closest to the pain and the impact of police brutality, and my faith tradition tells me these voices must be amplified. We all, not only officers, are accountable to our people. It's untenable to know that citizens who assemble to exercise their right to protest find themselves on the receiving end of crowd control weapons. I am culpable when mass dispersals of chemical incapacitants and sound devices are a threat to those who gather to exercise their right to be seen and heard. I ask for your support of LC 17 and want to express appreciation for the opportunity to offer this testimony today. With all sincerity, thank you for your service to the people of Oregon.
Thank you. Okay, we have Ernestine Flemister, Jer Swigert, Kirsten Arias, Sarah Ennerone, Michael, no last name, and Stephanie Fiery.
This is Ernestine Flemister. Can you hear me?
Yes, please proceed.
Co-chairs Bynum and Manning and members of the Joint Committee on Transparent Policing and Use of Force Reform. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to testify on this very important piece of legislation. My name is Ernestine Flemister, and I'm the priest at St. Luke's Episcopal Church in Grants Pass. I'm also a part of the BIPAC Faith Leaders Council for Black Lives, a community of faith leaders in the Pacific Northwest working together for justice and freedom. I'm in speaking on behalf of LC 19. We believe that policing is dangerous for Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities, and also for police officers. We want to have this bill passed because it can only improve our lives. We don't believe that policing can only be fixed by better training or identifying an officer committing an offense, as we tragically learned from the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. We must reimagine policing and create policies that focus on community safety. Publicly available information of officer misconduct is long overdue. Police officers have a lot of responsibility and power in our communities. Our communities should have access to information and knowledge about officers who have misconduct complaints levied against them, how they are disciplined, and how frequently complaints are filed against them. This is a crucial accountability mechanism in a system that has far too often given disproportionate power to police and not enough to its citizens. Access to these records is essential in making sure that individual officers with a pattern of misconduct aren't able to move from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, harming community members. Transparency is the hallmark of a just and fair community where everyone is held accountable. No one should be above the law. No one. As faith leaders, we yearn for a beloved community based on justice, equality, and opportunity, and love for our sisters and brothers. There can be no justice without accountability and truth-telling. This bill takes a small step towards that broader goal. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this issue.
Thank you for your testimony today. We really appreciate it. So next we have Jer Swigert, Kirsten Arias, Sarah Ennerone, Michael, no last name, and Stephanie Byrie. There's someone that's already unmuted, so you can just say your name and begin speaking. Okay. Next, we have Juniper Simonis, Patrick O'Haron, and Jill McAllister. *6 to unmute. Juniper Simonis, Patrick O'Haron, and Jill McAllister.
Yeah.
Staff, if you wouldn't mind muting the person that doesn't intend to speak.
Hello, this is Patrick O'Haron. Is it all right if I go?
Please, go ahead.
Yeah. Chair Bynum and members of the committee, my name is Patrick O'Haron. I live in Multnomah County. I work in Marion County as an acute care and trauma surgeon at Salem Hospital. I'm also the board president of Oregon Physicians for Social Responsibility. We at Oregon Physicians for Social Responsibility have already submitted written comments, so these comments are personal. I want to express my support for the efforts of this committee. This committee has taken to improve police accountability, as can be seen in the legislative concepts 742, 743, 762, and 763. And in my limited time, I want to focus on just a few of the many thoughts I have on this work. It's my conclusion after much painful contemplation that policing in this state and country is a deeply flawed institution. You can literally spend hours watching video after video after video of police brutality, including severe beatings and killings of members of our communities by police. Black, Indigenous, and other peoples of color community members are overrepresented victims of police violence. It's extremely rare to see officers face discipline and virtually non-existent to see changes in police culture or behavior. So I think that strengthening LCs 742, 3, 762, and 3 by, for instance, legislating more robust enforcement mechanisms and penalties and then passing them into law is just a start. The ultimate goal should be preventing police brutality and misconduct, not just being more aware of it and punishing officers after it happens. Police are paid to serve the public. As a surgeon, my first directive is to do no harm. Unless we also reduce the scope of policing, demilitarize, and downsize police forces, there is no reason to expect a cessation of the considerable harms that continue to occur. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I'll recall those names for one last time. Jarrett Swigert, Kirsten Arias, Sarah Enneron, Michael no last name, and Stephanie Byrie.
This is Juniper Simonis. Can you hear me?
Yes, please proceed.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry, I was having unmuting problems before.
Okay.
Great that I can get through to you. And thank you for expressly making time for everybody to speak, because I believe that's really important, and I am very appreciative of all the voices that I've been hearing so far. My name is Dr. Juniper Simonis. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a resident of Multnomah County, District 23 for the Senate and District 46 for the House. Thank you to the committee, the task force, and to the co-chairs for the time and the focus on this. I'm going to focus right now on intersection of LC 17 and LC 18. I have a PhD in ecology and evolutionary biology from Cornell University. I'm an aquatic ecologist, and I am actually conducting research to understand the influence of these chemical munitions that law enforcement agents are using on the aquatic environment in the Willamette River. To date, I have actually found munitions that have been used by law enforcement agents that are in the Willamette River. I have recovered them just south of the Hawthorne Bridge. These weapons are not just impacting people, as we've been hearing about, but they're also impacting the wildlife, and that includes things all the way up to salmon very quickly. And I would encourage folks to really broaden the scope around that. And then with respect to LC-18, it has been a chore. It has taken over 5 days to identify a sergeant who we believe to be Sergeant John Oliphant, who is wearing number 31 on the back of his helmet, carrying live chemical grenades in his hand, walking towards members of the press, and apparently using chemical weapons which he is not certified to use. As far as we can tell from his certification online, he has no quality, no training or certification in either grenade usage or chemical weapons usage, and we had to figure that out through days of searching. LC 17 and 18 both are important steps forward. They do not go far enough, but please recognize how hard everybody is working to figure out what we are being poisoned with by law enforcement. Thank you very much all for your time.
Thank you. Okay, it looks like we're having a couple of people having a hard time getting on. So we'll keep going, and when they get on, they can just jump in. All right, so Jill McAllister, Scott Winkles yielded his time, Ellen Mickle, and Samad Husseini.
Imad Husseini here, I can speak.
Please, go ahead. Thank you.
All right. Formal introduction, I'll read it out as I am actually testifying on behalf of someone. Hello, my name is Imad Husseini. I testify today on behalf of Mary Barbie, a family member of Pacific Northwest Family Circle. Mary Barbie's cousin, loved one, Wesley Allen Barbie, was killed by California police. Mary Barbie's son, loved one, Melvin Lewis Dillon, was nearly killed by Washoe County Sheriff while in custody in the Northern Nevada Detention Center. Ms. Barbie has a lot of lived experience with policing and the prison industrial complex. Here's what she has to say. Whereas qualified immunity allows police officers, district attorneys, and prosecutors, and at times even judges, to lie with impunity, in the absence of the federal qualified immunity law, these actions would break the law. Whereas qualified immunity allows officers to lie during an interrogation or while obtaining a warrant and to provide false evidence or plant evidence to secure their conviction. Whereas officers, district attorneys, and prosecutors state that ignorance is no excuse for not following the law. Whereas most non-police community members have not practiced law and are not versed in it, but are still expected to know the stringently and confusingly worded quotes of the law. Whereas officers, district attorneys, and prosecutors have studied law as their chosen profession. Whereas on many occasions, officers blatantly do the complete opposite with their sworn oath. Therefore, we should resolve to hold officers accountable for their misconduct and stop using the law and the ignorance of others as their scapegoat. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We appreciate that. Okay. I want to let everyone know that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 more people that have not been called yet, but I think that we can get through them. Staff, I'm going to pause and ask if I have technical permission to go over by 15 minutes. I think I can do this in a half hour. And then committee, I'm going to ask if you can, if we get permission, if you can stay, please, with the exception of Senators Hansel and Taylor, who have been at this all day. They were on committee this morning with the Business and Labor Senate version. So staff, would you help me out here?
We did get the okay to go until 3:30, so 3:15 is acceptable.
Okay, and Rep. Kenny Geyer says that she can stay. Is there anyone else that has an objection, has an issue with us trying to accommodate as much public testimony as possible? I'm going to look in the chat box. Rep. Noble needs to leave. Taylor can stay. Okay. I think I have enough to continue. So let's keep going. All right. Jill McAllister, Ellen Mickle, Grace Dalto, Megan Tucker.
Hi, this is Ellen Mickle.
Hi, Ellen. Please give us your testimony.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair Bynum and committee members for this opportunity to testify. My name is Ellen Mickle. I am a resident of Multnomah County. Today, I am speaking in general support of LC 17 through 20 with particular focus on 19 and 20. My own activation into organizing and civic engagement was initially driven by concerns around climate change, but the same root causes that drive climate change also drive our societal crisis of over-policing, both of which have disproportionate impact on Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. Bringing it closer to home, many of the same elements that make Portland a keystone of what some call the thin green line of resistance to fossil fuels also have made it center stage for a dangerous agenda from the Trump administration, white nationalist groups, as well as apparently a fertile ground for unchecked police violence, evidenced by the fact that Portland currently ranks highest in the country for the number of incidents where police responded to citizens at the peaceful George Floyd protests with unnecessary force and brutality. Specifically, I support LC 19 on misconduct reports and 20 on use of force reports, as I see them as important steps for increasing transparency and holding police accountable, particularly because LC 20, if I'm not mistaken, builds on HB 4301 passed in the August special session, which was an advancement on requirements around use of force. However, still gives me concern because it just seems to require verbal warning, giving reasonable opportunity to comply and consider alternatives to physical force, which seems a lower bar to me than the international requirements that there are. And so in closing, I do see these as important improvements to just build a more just system around requiring transparency to see what further improvements there are that need to be made. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Grace Dalto, Megan Tucker, Robert Erickson, Nathan Hall.
Robert Erickson, sir.
Please proceed.
My name is Robert Erickson. I'm from Multnomah County. To the chair and members of the committee, thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak with you today about my experiences in the near 100 days of demanding police accountability in Oregon. Having read through bills LC 17 through LC 20, I see genuine efforts to better protect citizens engaging in their First Amendment rights, and for that I genuinely thank you. However, I have witnessed firsthand the disproportionate and willful use of violence against citizens by the various police agencies of Multnomah County and the greater Oregon area. Too many of these bills focus on the symptoms of an unaccountable police force, but not their causes. OHSU nurse and volunteer medic Tyler Cox wasn't recently assaulted and subsequently hospitalized by a Portland officer due to a lack of regulation or training. It was because the officer lacked control of his own emotions. A protester last August didn't require surgery after Portland officers intentionally aimed impact munitions at the back of their head because operational regulations and rules weren't tight enough. It was because the officers are emboldened by a culture of permission. George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, two names on the ever-growing list of Black and Indigenous people who have been murdered with impunity by police, weren't killed because the government failed to define what is justified in the line of duty. They were murdered because the government has failed to hold police accountable to the same laws that citizens are. In the heat of the moment, police have demonstrated they cannot be trusted to make decisions based off of what's best for public safety. If they could, Portland wouldn't have been overrun by thousands of armed Trump supporters, resulting in a death and numerous injuries. If police accountability and thus the end of nightly protests is a priority to this legislative body, then the only tool at your disposal is the complete and total abolition of qualified immunity. Since choosing to take up the call of police accountability, nothing has made me feel less safe in Portland than witnessing firsthand the violence born from the disdain that police have for the citizens that they're supposed to serve and protect. Any laws passed that falls short of holding police departments and their individual officers criminally liable for injury and death will be a total failure. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't feel the need to continue calling names. If there's someone that's whose audio is working, please speak up and say your name.
Sorry, do you mean just of the batch of names you just called?
Sure, what's your name? And we'll cross you off the list. Go ahead and speak.
My name is Christopher Kutra.
Yep, okay, go for it.
Okay. I live in Multnomah County. Firstly, I want to thank the chair for providing space to make sure that testimony is prioritized and people could be heard. Secondly, I just want to address a few points. Firstly, I wholeheartedly agree with the last speaker. Secondly, I want to speak to the issue of chemical weapons. These are weapons that are banned under the Geneva Convention. These are weapons that are considered too gruesome for warfare, and they have absolutely no business being used against protesters, against medics, against press, against community members who are not even part of the protest. Reports of indiscriminate use of tear gas and its impact are devastating, and I want to particularly point out women who have reported issues with menstrual cycles and other very disturbing symptoms as a byproduct of tear gas. That should be banned altogether. Next, I want to speak to just a few other points. I've worked as a legal observer for the National Lawyers Guild as a volunteer, and understanding how important it is to be able to identify officers within the context of transparency and accountability is vital. The idea that as police have been assaulting indiscriminately and targeting members of the press, protesters, etc., during these protests, at the same time as them concealing their identities with these randomized numbers that the public has no access to, is offensive, and name tags need to be the very bare minimum. In the same vein, LC 821, about tracking Fox crimes and making a public database, strongly support this measure. And lastly, I just want to state that qualified immunity is something that absolutely has to end. Police unions have navigated this policy in place, and it is seriously thwarted accountability. And I just want to honor the fact that community members are defunding and calling for abolition precisely because there's been absolutely no accountability or legislation that's really taken them to task for the brutality that they have consistently enacted against community members. And that's all.
Thank you for your testimony. I'm going to go through and finish calling the names. There's just 5 more, and then whoever's on the line will order you from there. Jarrett Savelli, Nathan Hall, Noah Hatt, Lawson Wakeman, Colleen Carroll, Morgan Schmidt, and Bryce Cofield. That completes the list. If you are on, please activate your microphone and say your name.
Sarah Iannarone has been trying to get in from the beginning. Can you see what is stopping her from getting in?
I will ask staff to work on that. Thank you.
This is Sarah Iannarone. I think I am in. Should I wait until the end of people testifying, or do you want me to go ahead and testify now?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate you offering us this opportunity to comment. It's such an important issue. These are such critical issues that have been facing our city for years, but we know that they've become heightened in the last several months. Special thanks to Chair Bynum and Representative Frederick for your leadership here in my city, Portland, and the leadership from the POC caucus. As you said, my name is Sarah Iannarone. My pronouns are she, her. I reside in Multnomah County, and I am actually vying for the mayor's seat against the incumbent in the general election this November. for mayor of Portland. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade. These travesties of justice did not happen in Oregon, but they easily could have, as they did for Christopher Kalanji, Honest Hayes, Keaton Otis, Kendra James, and too many others. I urge you to support the slate of bills in front of you that work to enhance accountability for police and rebuild trust with the community. Public safety is an issue on the minds of all Portlanders. I am communicating with 10,000 plus Portlanders via phone and text every week, and it is the top issue on people's minds. And what they tell me is that Portland is not a safe place for all Portlanders in perception or reality. We hear that the majority of Black and Hispanic Portlanders are not satisfied with the police force's ability to protect them from violent crime, and they feel that policing isn't currently addressing their safety or needs. In the wake of this inequality, tens of thousands of us have taken to the streets over the last 100 days to express our dissatisfaction, our anger with the status quo of racial inequities, from the inequality enforced by policing, not just in my city, but in cities around the state. And so those of us in this revolutionary moment are in agreement that city police departments are overfunded, hyper-militarized, and lacking in accountability. And I know that Portland is united in agreeing that Black lives matter. So I think it's imperative that we come together as a community at this critical time to rethink what public safety means and for whom. Throughout Oregon, the work of dramatically rethinking and changing our public safety system, led by BIPOC communities and frontline communities, is happening. And I am listening and learning from these conversations, as I know many of you are. While grassroots mobilization is rapidly shifting,
testimony.
Sure. Portland cannot address these issues without the state's help. I thank you for considering a range of improvements via the suite of reforms, and especially want to make sure that you support LC 17. I have it, but I think it may be LC 42, furthering the restrictions placed on the use of chemical incapacitants. I do not support the indiscriminate use of force against the public, and also regarding LC 746. Thank you for continuing to improve the state arbitrator system. And thank you for your time, and I'll submit the rest of my testimony in writing. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you for your testimony today.
Chair, can we get that name quickly again for the record for staff? The woman that was just testifying, we missed her name when she introduced herself.
Sarah Iannarone. I
Thank
hope
you.
I right. I know she said it a million times, but I haven't said it a million times. Okay. I'm just going to call the last, the people that I missed. I didn't miss them. We haven't heard from them. Just to make sure that we're clearing everyone out. I have Scott Rudolph, Tyler Coleman,
Colleen Carroll. Can you hear me?
Would you say your name again?
Colleen Carroll.
And this is Bryce Cofield.
Okay, so we'll have Colleen first, and then that was Bryce Cofield. All right, you can both go. Well, Colleen first, and then Bryce.
To the co-chairs and members of the committee, my name is Colleen Carroll, and I'm a resident of Washington County. I'm here to offer my support for all of the bills under consideration, and I will speak specifically to LC 742 and LC 825. With regard to 742, I also encourage everybody to move back to the original language. I speak as a researcher in the field of international peace building, which is the field in which we look to resolve injustice in nonviolent ways and to transform cultural and structural conditions that generate deadly violence. And it is with that in mind that I'd actually like to spend my time refuting some of the statements put forth by the representative for the Oregon Coalition of Police Sheriffs on this bill. I quote from that statement: removing non-lethal tools like chemical incapacitants and kinetic impact projectile undercuts decades of work to add non-lethal tools to policing, so that police officers aren't left with deadly force as their only option. I urge you not to be swayed by this coercive pressure and false binary, to say that the removing of poisons and what are also referred to as less lethal, but he refers to as non-lethal because he wants you to think that they are safe. I urge you to remember that they are less lethal and that they are, in fact, damaging to people. So to say that removing them leaves police forces with deadly force as their only option is coercive pressure and a false binary. That statement is followed by de-escalation necessarily involves non-lethal tools being available. And I agree with that statement. We are simply saying not these tools. There are other tools of de-escalation. There are entire fields, and there are lots of people who could be brought in, as the original language stated, right? Mediators, medics, other ways. De-escalation does not mean gas and impact munitions. And lastly, he closes that statement saying that, for the record, many of these instigating events seem to be at the impetus by federal officers, and I refute that. PPB has used these repeatedly on me and on hundreds of other people. Do not let him and the lobby of the cops make us think that it was only the feds doing this. So I just wanted, for the record, that that statement is coercive, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Bryce Cofield.
Yes, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Thank you both. My name is Bryce Cofield. I am a faith leader in Newberg, Oregon. I'm also set to be sworn in next week as a councilman in the city of Newberg. And as far as we know, the first Black councilman. And so I think both of you co-chairs in particular, I'm looking at your faces online, and it brings me joy. And thank you. I mentioned my race because I said, as far as we know, there have not been tracking of data as it pertains to the race, ethnicity, or gender of previous council folks. And so I bring that up in speaking specifically to LC 762 as well as 763, because to me, this is data. I am a researcher by trade, and we know that in order to make good decisions, we need data. And we need data that is also transparent. And so when I think about what it means to help provide legislation and leadership that would help keep our community safe, we absolutely need to know the history, the background in terms of reporting of complaints and allegations and charges and disciplinary proceedings, so on and so forth, of individuals in the police force. So we absolutely need to have a database of reports of use of physical force by police officers, peace officers, et cetera, to be able to make good decisions about who we hire, who we don't hire, so that folks don't just move from one district to another. And I will conclude with, as someone who hopes to lead in my community well, I need information. So I thank you all for the good work you've done, as well as who you are leading in this state. It has ripple effects more than you know. So thank you very much, and I pray for you all.
Thank you, Mr. Cofield. We appreciate your support. Mr. Cofield was the last person on the list. Let me check and see. We have other active phone numbers here. We have quite a few phone numbers that are still active on the call.
That's why I'm still active.
I'm sorry?
Can you hear me? I'm representing Reverend Morgan Schmidt. So can I go next?
Of course, please.
Thank you. My name is Bob Brown, and I am a board member of the Interfaith Movement for Immigrant Justice. And I am reading testimony that was provided to me by Morgan Schmidt, a Presbyterian pastor in Bend, Oregon, and a leader of the Pandemic Partners. Dear co-chairs Bynum, Manning, and members of the Joint Committee, thank you for listening today. I offer my voice in solidarity and support of BIPOC communities who have been disproportionately impacted by the injustices woven into the very fabric of law enforcement. I speak in wholehearted support of LC 17, 18, 19, and 20 today. Each of these bills will bring us closer and closer to holding law enforcement accountable to their primary directive, which is to serve and protect as officers of peace. I believe these measures will go a very long way to restoring the bond of trust between our communities and law enforcement, and paving a way towards communities of color that can flourish without fear. I participated in peaceful protests in Portland this past July. I brought a sign that simply said, "Love wins." This statement reflects the core of my faith, with motivations of my community organizing and my hope for how we can arrange our world toward justice, inclusion, and peace. That sign is leaning against the wall of my garage today with a hole in it from a rubber bullet. Never in my life have I questioned whether I would face harm at the hands of law enforcement. That has been my privilege, while my BIPOC neighbors live in constant state of fearing of the police. I ask the committee to please give your complete support to these bills, which will hold police officers accountable. Please listen to those closest to the pain of police brutality, our Black, Indigenous, and people of color siblings, and organizations like the Pacific Northwest Family Circle. I elevate their courage, collaboration, dedication, and voices today, and implore you to fully support the bill package for the sake of community flourishing and justice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. I wanted to make sure that if Scott Winkles was still on the line, that he had an opportunity to testify. But anyone else that's on the line, you can chime in and I'll cross your name off. Okay. I'll give it 30 more seconds and then we'll close out with comments from the committee and my esteemed co-chair. Mr. Co-Chair, do you have comments while we wait for the last few people to unmute themselves?
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. I do. This is, I don't believe that I had mentioned it previously, but regarding LC 762, or else formerly LC 19, back in June 4th, I introduced for LC draft a bill that was submitted to the U.S. Senate by Senator Jeff Merkley. It has to do with a national police misconduct database and transparency in hiring bill that he introduced in the federal legislation in the Senate. I've not heard more about this, but I did speak with Senator Merkley briefly when we were down providing support for the U.S. Post Office or Postal Service here in Eugene. And he mentioned briefly about it, asked me where it was, and of course, we're on hold with everything. So that would be separate, something to look at moving forward, but it was done outside of this particular bill. I also want to make sure that the record is straight. This is not us against the police department or policing. It is not that. It's been characterized that by some. It is not about that. We all realize that the police department serve at the pleasure of the people, as do the legislators. And inherently, the job comes with high extreme risk, the same as when I served in the military. I understand that, but that did not give me the authority or the will every time I wanted to cause harm to anyone to do that and feel that I am justified. We are accountable, and this is what this conversation is about. It's about bringing us all together, realizing that it's to protect and serve. And again, I will offer those that say that you have to have a warrior's mentality. I understand that. There are organizations that are hiring right now for people that want to have warrior mentality. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard. They're hiring right now. If you want to dress up like a warrior and you want to engage in warfare, they are hiring. In the meantime, this is about protecting the citizens of the community. And if we don't come together and realize that and recognize that, then fundamentally there we have flawed sense of responsibilities and where we need to be. So let's come together. People are saying denounce the violence. I denounce the violence, but I will also ask those that support the armed vigilantes to denounce them as well, because I have seen peaceful protesters to get use gas and everything against them. But when these armed vigilantes roll in, where are the police? I don't see them. We need to stop this. This is getting crazy. No, it's past crazy. My comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. If there are any more, if there's any more public input, I'll take that now.
Hi, this is Jer Swigert. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you. You'll be our last one, and then I'll close it out and offer an opportunity for committee members. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank the co-chairs and the members of the Joint Committee for creating this space for us. My name is Jer Swigert. I'm a faith leader in Bend and a part of Central Oregon's Clergy for Justice, as well as the executive director of a national peacemaking training organization called the Global Immersion Project. I'm calling to offer my full support of this particular set of measures. As a member of Oregon's clergy, I was one of many from around the state who were recently organized and invited by the Interfaith Movement for Immigrant Justice to participate in a sacred vigil in Portland and to be clergy witnesses and nonviolent presence during a recent protest. I will not forget the moment when a collaboration of law enforcement deemed a nonviolent demonstration a riot and immediately and indiscriminately began deploying gas, non-lethal bullets, and flashbang grenades to disperse what literally at the time was little more than a peaceful gathering of protesters participating in the anthems of the abolition. In that time, I was shot twice, once in the foot with a non-lethal bullet and once in the lower leg by a gas canister while wearing full clergy regalia. Less than 3 weeks later, I stood mystified as local police showed up to a nonviolent direct action in Bend in full riot gear, militarized with fingers on the triggers of their assault rifles. I'm in favor of this bill package with a special focus on the use of weapons against protesters. I urge you to end local police's ability to use control weapons for mass dispersal. I want to urge you to disallow the dispersal of chemical agents and impact munitions. I want to urge you to end the use of indiscriminate use of pepper balls and rubber bullets. I urge you to end the senseless impunity given to police for their acts of violence by removing civil immunity of police officers for violent actions committed during, quote, riot. Not only are these actions and resources detrimental to the physical health of us and our neighbors, they're destructive to the trust that is the currency of thriving communities and a flourishing Oregon. So I thank you, and with respect for your office and with regard to the countless friends and neighbors, I'm thinking especially on behalf of those who have been marginalized and terrorized by police violence. Thank you for hearing this.
Thank you. So at this time, I will close the public hearings on LC 17, LC/742, LC 18/743, LC 19/762, LC 20/763, LC 746, LC 747, LC 821, and LC 825, as well as LC 882. Committee members, are there any final closing comments?
Representative Bynum?
Yes.
Ms. Senator Taylor here, please.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Okay, thank you, Co-Chair Bynum and Co-Chair Senator Manning. I want to thank you for bringing the committee back together today and for hearing the testimony. And although I understand that we have members of the legislature who represent different parts of the state, for those of us who are representing areas of Portland, and I happen to represent inner Southeast Portland, I hope that what our fellow committee members are hearing is that folks are here in the Portland area are very much concerned about what is happening and what the plan is going forward. I think that we have heard that today, and we will continue to hear that. I understand that we have been able, and I'm very proud of the legislation that we've passed so far, especially the bill that we passed on August 10th. I think that was great. These are all great steps forward. What I was wondering is what we could do to be able to, I want to support the comments by Representative Alyssa Kenney-Dyer, because I can tell you that at least here in my district, what folks are really wanting to hear and see is what is the path. And we are talking about transitioning into these suite of bills into the judiciary committees. And that's great, that's fine. And I know that both you, Representative Bynum, and Senator Pruszanski will do a great job. What I would like to know is how can we provide clear direction to the public about what will be happening between now, here on September 3rd, and when we convene again in January. That's a considerable period of time. And if there is some way where we can systematically come up with a way to communicate with the public about what the legislature is working on, what our next steps are, et cetera. I don't want to step on the toes of you, who both of you are the chairs of the respective judiciary committees between the House and the Senate. However, I'm pretty sure that at least here in Southeast Portland, we are going to continue to hear from individuals, and I think also from other parts of the state, about wanting information about what are we doing, especially regarding these bills, and when can there be feedback provided. So if there's something, I know what the normal course of process is, but these are unusual times. And I think that the public, and especially when we heard from constituents, those who testified today, and all the testimony we received from now, and all the articles and everything that's been submitted into OLIS, I think we've heard pretty loud and clear that Oregonians would like to have more direct information, would like to know about what bills are coming forward for the next session, and I would just like to see some sort of more positive, straightforward action about how we are going to be including the public. So anything that we can do in that realm would be greatly appreciated. And I make that request in the most respectful way possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Taylor. What I can offer is that I personally felt that I had to fight to get the two concepts that we had in House Bill 4301 that were just signed, I think, Monday by the governor. There was not a consideration to have any policy bills in the last special session. I understand that there's assurance that we will have policy bills in the next special session, but that takes the cooperation of the governor's office, Senate leadership, House leadership, as well as the four caucuses. So while we as a committee will do our work, we will work. I think we've done extraordinary, we've almost exhausted ourselves in the number of hearings that we've had, the variety of testimony, how open we've attempted to be. But it actually takes the gears behind this committee to work in order for us to move something forward faster than the long session, which would start in February.
Follow up, please.
Sure.
Thank you, Representative Bynum. So I completely agree with everything that you said, and I know how hard you and Senator Manning fought for the bill that we were able to pass on August 10th. I was a very strong, as you know, a strong supporter of that and wanted that bill and other bills to come forward during that special session. The reason I referred to Representative Alyssa Kenney-Guyer, I just want to go ahead and put on the record, I am supportive of us having a third special session and to take up more of these measures that we are discussing here today. And again, I hope I did not come across making any implication of any other way. I'm quite confident of the work that you, Representative Bynum and Senator Manning, are trying to get over the finish line here. And I just want to express my support. And I think there's an urgency, and I would like us to take these measures up in another special session prior to the 2021 session. So those are my comments, and thank you again for the hearing today.
Senator Przanski, you look like you want to chime in, and then we had a request from Representative Kenney-Guyer.
Yeah, not really. I'm listening and attentive. And answer to the question, it appears that what we will be faced with is what is going to be the next steps within the leadership as to what other times we may have the opportunity to meet. Clearly, we have legislative days that are set for the week of September 21st. The Joint Judiciary Committee, or the committees, will be meeting jointly on Friday at 1 p.m. for those who are following, so that's September 25th. And then there will be another set of days for legislative days in December, since we'll be going into the long session. Whether or not we have another special session between now and the December legislative days, only time will tell. That will be, again, the decision made by leadership and the governor's office. With that being said, if that shouldn't occur, I would assume that these bills will continue to stay within the jurisdiction of this joint committee until the legislative days. And I would assume at that point there would be some type of configuration, whatever that may be, to have some type of transition for the bills that are going to be recommended or concepts being recommended for further proceeding in the 2021 session. Once we have the December legislative days, at that point, we will be moving forward. Everything that has been pre-session filed will be basically entered into the records, and we'll go through the process that needs to. So when we come into session in January for the long session, all of the bills that have been pre-session filed will be read into the records. And then, as we discussed in the earlier part of today's hearing, whatever separation or comparison as to putting some of the bills maybe in Senate, some of the bills in the House, or whatever configuration that is, then they will be ready for work. And I'm assuming that both myself and Chair Bynum are going to be prioritizing the work that we have before us and trying to move it into the limelight of the long session so it can be acted on sooner than later. That's all I have.
Thank you. Rep. Kenny Guyer?
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to give a closing remark. I want to just echo what Senator Taylor said, and also Jason Kafoury earlier about the need to keep up this momentum. I deplore the violence from any side in the street protests, and I have continually said to people, you need to work on the policy side. You need to change the policy. But I know that many of my constituents, myself included, feel frustrated by the lack of urgency in addressing the reform that's so badly needed, both at the city and the state level. So I just want to, I know that Chair Bynum, you have pushed for this as well. I believe that Chair Manning has as well. But I just want to reiterate in the closing minutes here how important it is that we continue the momentum of this work group and the other pressing issues that are facing Oregonians during particularly this time of two pandemics, the coronavirus and racism. And I hope that I urge the presiding officers and the governor to push for a third special session so that we can take care of these really pressing needs. Thank you for the opportunity, Chair Bynum and Chair Manning, to provide some closing remarks and provide this opportunity for the public to testify, and I hope we keep it up with the urgency it deserves.
Thank you. Are there other members who would like to come in and give some thoughts? My Republican colleagues?
Sounds like that's a wrap.
All right. Just want to make sure I gave everybody an opportunity. So to close this out, we will, if people are interested in the work groups, some mentioned in their testimony, they should contact our committee administrators, and that is listed on the website. But Jillian, would you mind being a contact if people want to participate in the work group?
Absolutely not. That'd be fine.
Okay, so her name is Jillian Fisher, and you can find her on the website as a member of the LPRO staff. So with that, I will close. Let me make sure I get my script right here. It is 3:24 p.m. and let me get the date right. It is Thursday, September 3rd, my daughter's 12th birthday, and I am closing the Joint Committee on Transparent Policing and Use of Force Reform. Thank you, everyone, for participating.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.